Jill. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience working in a for-profit college. So when I first saw the topic for this workshop, I thought, like, what could be more of a symbol of capitalism or neoliberalism than for-profit higher education? And what a great opportunity it is to finally, like, get to talk about it to people who are in the library field, because it's not a topic that has a wide body of research. It's not one that I learned about in library school. And it's really not a sector in the library world that is respected among academic elites. But unfortunately, it's a growing sector of education, and it's definitely one that is going to undoubtedly grow under the Trump administration with the lovely Betsy DeVos. So I worked at the Swedish Institute, and when I started working there, my definition of what a for-profit school was very different from what it is today. Originally, I thought that the mission of the school was to offer some practical education that would be kind of an alternative to traditional education. And I knew that these types of vocational schools existed and that they had gone back to, like, colonial times with trade schools and apprenticeships. I also, so then I started doing a little research. And I saw that after World War II, everybody knows about the GI Bill, and a lot of returning vets, my dad was included, they took advantage of this, and they went to college. A lot of them also went to trade schools, and then they later became plumbers, cooks, mechanics, etc. So in 1965, I think with the best intentions, LBJ enacted a new federal education bill. And what this did was it allowed federal funding of for-profit colleges. And like I said, I'm sure that it wasn't the original intention, but this slowly opened the door for fraud because it guaranteed federal funding, not just for educators, but for profit takers and venture capitalists. It is probably not a coincidence that less than 10 years later, the University of Phoenix was founded. And if you haven't heard about the University of Phoenix, you don't watch TV, and you don't go on the internet. Okay. So in the 1990s, deregulation, and I think like this all traces back to Reagan, deregulation, a booming stock market. So now Wall Street took an interest in for-profit education sector, and this turned the sector into the darlings of Wall Street. So now what it did was all these little small schools were now answerable to their shareholders, not their students. And this saw a huge influx of lobbying dollars that turned the industry into a self-policing, bottom-line focused, I like to say farce, or circus. So I didn't know about any of this when I first took my job, but it slowly revealed itself to me through subtle and not so subtle clues on a nearly daily basis. I think back to the interview I had for this job and how the deans and administrators asked questions about how I would run the library. And I really wonder if they cared at all. So one of the first clues I had, and probably one of the most hair-raising, was the price tag for attending this school. So, for example, students paid $30,000 to be massage therapists, a field that, according to the occupational handbook, is so physically grueling that the burnout rate is averaged to be 4 years. It's got a, also according to the Occupational Outlook Handbook, in New York State it has an annual salary of $46,000. So basically, every program at, take a little step back. There's also public options for massage therapy degrees that are like less than 5,000. But so the rest of the programs at the school are pretty much on that same model. Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the director of education. His last name was ethnic, so we all called him Dr. J. He did not have a command of the English language. His emails and memos had to be deciphered from its many topics and misused idioms. The largest contribution I remember him making was enacting a dress code that no one really adhered to. And his name was Dr. J, so he did claim to be a medical doctor, but nobody really knew. And I once asked a group of people, so in case of a medical emergency, is he actually a legitimate doctor? And they seemed to be confused that I actually even cared. So, but his prior experience, and this is something that is very common in the for-profit school industry, is that he worked, his job prior to this was working at Sanford Brown, which is another for-profit school that was actually shut down for some fraudulent activities. So basically, the heart and soul of the school was the admissions department, which was run like a telemarketing center. And basically, the targets are purchased through online lead generators. So that's how they get students in the door. The admissions counselors were basically just salespeople reading from a script. And it really was clear that this was not about people, and it was all about numbers. We even would get calls in the library from some of these prospective students telling us to call admissions and tell them to stop calling them. Okay. The script that admissions read, it was all about taking a leap of faith to change your life, and how regardless of what was going on in your life, you needed to enroll yesterday. While almost every student was eligible for financial aid and they were admitted, the accreditation process did require that students take a baseline multiple choice test called the Wonderlic. This was originally administered in the library and really clued me into what was going on in the school. The maximum score on this test was a grade of 50. Many of the students were admitted with scores under 10. This was far lower than other schools would accept, and this was often after multiple attempts. While this may be seen as giving opportunity to students, we didn't offer any remedial education. And low test scores had a correlation to the likelihood of students not completing their education. But it was kind of a catch-22, because was it more valuable to complete your education and end up in extreme debt, or was it better to just cut your losses? Regardless, the student was always going to wind up with the debt, and the school would wind up with the money. In keeping with their practice of hiring from the for-profit school industry, the president of the school had formerly worked for Corinthian College and had come out of retirement to take his position. If the name Corinthian College sounds familiar, it would be because it was shut down by the government for being a fraudulent institution. Once a week, he would chair a management meeting, which was nothing more than a chance for him to give out orders. A lot of time was spent on team-building activities, such as going around the room and sharing a good thing, as well as purchasing lottery tickets together. The meeting always revolved solely around enrollment numbers, because the numbers equaled money. It was impossible to get traction in the meetings over anything academic. A lot of time was spent complaining about the students. When decisions were made, they often resulted in things like buying a popcorn machine to help get new students enrolled. And just so you know, I'm not talking about like a $20 countertop air popper. I'm talking about like balls to the wall, $400 in-home movie theater cart. And we bought 2 of them. Yeah, it's true. So yeah, the fish does stink from the head down, and it was pretty smelly. So some of the teachers were so dangerously unstable that if the students' futures weren't at stake, it would have been comical. It was not uncommon to see a teacher drunk, asleep, or hear them making disparaging comments about students. Any sensible or sensitive person would see this as a likely result of the xenophobic culture that had been created by the administration. But despite this, like in every school, there was an opportunity to help students really achieve. And not to sound corny, but as long as there was going to be a library, I was going to make sure that despite the circumstances, I was going to be the best librarian I could be in this situation. So sometimes that meant just giving a transgender student a safe place to be, or helping a blind student not feel bad about buying his insulin on the internet. I was lucky enough to get to hire some great student assistants, one of whom I spotted as having great computer talent, and got him a job in the school's IT department. The last I heard, he was working at Columbia University, and he was aspiring to get his MLS. I still speak to the single mother who after being given a chance, became my right arm in the library. And not only did she succeed in all the classes at the school, she was able to move on to Hunter College, and whom I'm really proud to say is now a practicing nurse. So the job had me go through a lot of things that I really wouldn't have chosen to experience, but I was able to do some good.